is identity at the center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great, man. Other than the fact that I've been working on writing identity access management policies all day. But I mean, hey, what thing can you do that's more important than that to having a successful IAM program and having a good bedrock of solid IAM policies?
Rules of the road are important. Got to know which side you're driving on, what speed limits you can go, all that good stuff. Prevents accidents.
Right. That's right. I mean, it's at least a good starting point. And then you build your automation on top, you build your controls, but it's a good approach to have that as like your foundation rather than starting with the technology and then trying to retrofit policies to fit the technical capabilities that you have.
See, I don't know if I would agree with that. I think you should write a policy as the way it should be and not with your technology limitations in mind. Those would be treated as either exceptions to the policy or some other kind of mechanism.
So in other words, you agree with me completely because that's what I meant to say. However it came out, exactly what you said.
Okay. Yes, we're on the same page. And I concur, Doctor.
All right, Doctor. Yeah, the tough thing is sometimes taking some of the newer standards, like the NIST standards around 863B with the authentication assurance levels and just trying to apply them, because essentially I think what they say is if your data or your systems require this level of assurance, then you should apply these controls. But you have to kind of come up with a framework for how the organization decides what level of assurance is required for that data, right? Is it top secret systems, or what is the classification, or what are those rules of the road that your organization maps to those assurance levels? So I won't use the word fun, but important work.
Yeah, important. Interesting, a thinking game. Fun, I don't know about that one, but
yeah.
The good news is once you've got it down, you kind of have to get your framework in place, get your templates in place, and just start filling in blanks of what you want it to look like and stuff like that. This should not be like a very difficult exercise. Technically, this is more of a political exercise. What can the organization tolerate?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, oftentimes it is political because I think you and I agreed in theory that you want to write your policies for the way things should be, not for the way they are. There's not many senior executives that want to put out a set of policies and immediately be out of compliance with their own policies and have no hope of getting there within the near term. So the reality is it's probably you're designing your policies somewhat based on where you are with the goal of hardening them over time.
See, that's the catch-22 that comes up, is as soon as you write a good policy, you're automatically out of compliance. And so how do you demonstrate that to auditors or whoever you got to show these to? Is like, yeah, by the way, with this policy, are you compliant? No, but it sure is, this is where we want to be. So you need to have a conversation with internal audit, their C-suite, et cetera. Say, okay, how do we want to approach this? Because if you don't have a good policy, then that just means your security is weak. If you don't have the technology to support the policy or the people or the processes, those are also deficiencies. So it really is a little bit of a political game and trying to make sure that everyone understands, where you are today, where you should be, and what is the approach to explain that, policy-wise, and then obviously make sure your auditors are on board as well so you can defend it.
I mean, that's ultimately what, that's one of the real challenges for the practitioner is dealing with. We all philosophically know the right way to do things, and at the same time, we have to apply pragmatism. I think you've got to strike the right balance. I mean, if you only go for the lowest common denominator every time, it's just going to be the definition of that term laggard. I think what's cool about being a consultant is that you get to work with a lot of different organizations, and you have to kind of help your clients find that right pragmatic level between the reality and the goal. And so, you know, obviously, like we agreed, this isn't about fun. But I'll tell you one thing that I do find fun is conferences. I think it's just fun to be there with our fellow identity practitioners and get to know them, for them to get to know us. We've got a bunch of discount codes. What do you think? I mean, we haven't been reading them off for the last few episodes, even saying, go to the website, but maybe we ought to at least give the rundown of what conferences we're actually going to and we have discount codes for.
Yeah. Jim, would you say we have a plethora of discount codes for conferences?
Yeah, and we have a guest, so we don't want to go through all of them, and then we'll have to end the episode.
Right. This is a treatise on all of our conference discount codes, part 1A of 48. Let's just run through them real quick. So we've got the official cybersecurity summit. I think by the time people listen to this, it will be probably too late maybe for the one in Chicago that I'll be at, but Philadelphia should still be available September 25th. I will be there as well. By the way, all these codes are on our website, idacpodcast.com. Just scroll down a little bit. You'll see everything we've got listed there, and I'm constantly adding new ones as we get those in partnership with those folks. So that's Cybersecurity Summit. Then we've got Authenticate 2025, which we're actually going to talk a little bit more about here today. That's coming up as well. So that's in October in the lovely Carlsbad, California. I just got back from Monterey, California, like literally yesterday. So I'm heading back in a couple weeks to enjoy coastal California weather.
You poor thing.
I know, poor thing. I did come back to find 2 nails in my tire at the airport. So that was good times at about 1 a.m. But first world problems, we're fine. So that's the Authenticate conference. Then we've got InfoSec World. That's a new conference for both you and I, Jim, that we've never been to, but we're happy to partner with our friends over at CRA. So shout out to Shirley. That is in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, October 27, 28, and 29. Discount code for that as well. We've got a couple special codes as well because they have like government discounts and things like that. And then we've got Identiverse in DC in November. And then I think what will be the last conference of the year, which is the Gartner IAM Summit in Grapevine, Texas, in December 8th through the 10th. So we have a discount code for Gartner coming soon. It's not up on the website yet, but it will be coming, I think, in October is when we're able to post that. So keep an eye out for that. idacpodcast.com. Scroll down. Everything's there. Did I miss anything, Jim?
No. I mean, I'm excited for all of them, but special shout out for InfoSec World. Get a little bit of Disney while we're there, right? And, I'm thinking if you're looking for a work vacation or maybe you bring some family members, roll it all into one. Why not?
Okay, so why don't we get to our guest today? He is Nishant Kaushik. He is the new CTO at FIDO Alliance. He's been with us before, but welcome back to the show, Nishant.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Yeah, so I was kind of shocked that it's been so long. This is actually your 3rd appearance with us. You were way back on episode number 73 and then episode 171. So we've got your origin story back then. We'll ask people to go back and check that out. And then I think this is going to be episode number 373 if my math lines up. So welcome back again. And I did introduce you as the new CTO. That is relatively new role. So within the last month or so, I can't even, right? 2 weeks. Okay, so there you go. So what have you been up to? Now you're with FIDO Alliance as the CTO. I thought we had solved everything, with Passkeys, and now we're done. Like, what do you have left to work on now?
Well, I think it's interesting. When I was interviewing for this role, it was one of the same thoughts was like, what's next? Like, why would I want to take this job? And I think part of the challenge is digital identity is getting so much broader that you kind of have to look at it in the full picture. And Passkeys is important, but a part of that picture. And I think we still have a long way to go from having the right solution to actually having that solution making a difference. And when we were discussing this role, one of the key things that I kept coming back to is my own frustration that, we've been in this industry for so long, all of us, on the vendor side, practitioner side, and so on, and standards bodies, et cetera. And some of the smartest people I know, the best people I know are doing great work. And yet every day you're still seeing stories about breaches and continuous, stories about identities being stolen and everything. It's like, why haven't we gotten there yet, right? If it says, are we there yet? No, we're not. And a big part of that is coming up with the solution isn't really the only thing. It now has to scale, it has to be deployed, and it has to work for everybody. And I think there are still ways for us to go before we solve all of the problems required to achieve that there.
So it sounds like there's still ways to go here. And really the reason that we wanted to have you on, and this is kind of fortuitous timing, is there was an article that was on the IDPro newsletter that just came out recently talking about Black Hat and RSA and some of the concerns that were popping up around passkeys on there. So shout out to Rusty Deaton. He's the author of the article. So I'll link in our show notes where people can kind of check out what we're going to be talking about here and kind of follow around. But have you read that article? And if so, what are your initial thoughts on it?
Yeah, as a founding member of IDPro, I always pay attention to the IDPro newsletters. So it was not surprising to see that article. It's there's been a few actually, right? Not just Rusty's, but there's been a number of things in the press where journalists are going to the same conferences, Black Hat, etc., and they're attending these sessions and just walking away with takeaways that are half the picture, or are sort of not really examining things in a full way. And I think Rusty did a great job of sort of laying it out in terms of, well, it's a one-sided story being presented on stage. It's not looking at the entirety of the thing. And I think one of the important things to take away from Rusty's article, and there's a really good article on Ars Technica as well. And I just wrote a blog post for the FIDO Alliance blog, official blog, which is to understand that Passkeys doesn't exist on its own. It exists as part of a broader authentication framework, digital identity framework. And so when you're looking at the threat models that you have to account for, you have to understand that Passkeys operate within the threat model that your organization operates with. And you have to put in place supporting infrastructure for any authentication framework, not just Passkeys. Maybe you're rolling out, username, password, and SMS OTP, like so many organizations still are doing. Maybe you've gone to Authenticator apps, or you're using Microsoft Authenticator. Maybe you're using hardware tokens. It doesn't really matter what your authentication framework is. It doesn't exist in silo. It still relies on the environment within which the user is going to be operating. And you still need to do the work to ensure that the operating environment can support the security benefits of the authentication framework you're putting in. And Passkey is no different in that sense. So yeah, it's great that we have a technology that is phishing resistant, that is based on cryptography as opposed to shared secrets. But you're still operating with browsers. You're still operating on a myriad of desktops and platforms and phones all over the world. And you have to account for the differences those bring in and map those back to sort of your threat model. It's what you were discussing earlier, right? Policy, you don't define policy in a vacuum. Policy has to work for the organization, but it also has to work for the people that you're going to be applying those policies to. And you can't treat every end user as if they're the president of the United States or, the CEO of a Fortune 5 company, right? You have to, come up with the correct threat model and therefore apply policies based on that. And Passkeys is not going to solve all of that. Passkeys is not a silver bullet. It is a pretty cool solution for a very specific problem, but it has to work beyond that.
Yeah, it seems to me kind of the takeaway I got from the article was, I think where you're going with this is that Passkey is one of the solutions you can use. And I guess what I'd want to know as a practitioner is where is it meant to be used? Or maybe alternatively, it's looked at as where does it not make sense to use it because it could potentially fall prey to some of these things that Rusty brought up.
Yeah, so I think if you look at what Rusty was commenting on with respect to some of those presentations, a lot of those presentations were talking about how passkeys can be hacked or passkeys can be stolen. The fact of the matter is that Passkey cannot be stolen. What you can do is work around the passkey and attack the authentication framework around it. So for example, if you can trick the user into going through an account recovery flow, this is not new, right? We've talked about this as practitioners and for a long time, which is the stronger you make the front door, the more likely the attacker is going to go look for the back door or the windows and so on and so forth. So a long time ago, I wrote one of the body of knowledge articles for IDPro called MFA for humans. And a key part of that is that when you implement MFA, you are making your authentication stronger, which means you are creating more incentive for attackers to now start testing other parts of your authentication framework, including especially your account recovery flows. So any organization that is implementing passkeys is going to get really good authentication characteristics from that, really good security. But now that means, okay, now let's take a look at all these other aspects, right? So let's look at your account recovery flows. We look at things like your notifications out of band. Let's look at things like browser hygiene, especially if you're in an enterprise environment. You can see some of the higher risk enterprises going towards things like hardened browser. Why? Because they want to eliminate the threat of malicious extensions that people can just deploy on their browsers if they're using their own devices, right? So stuff like that has to be accounted for.
Yeah, it kind of feels to me like you're not here just saying, okay, these aren't valid concerns, but you're saying, okay, yes, these are things that are understood. They are shortcomings to how authentication is done today, right? Until you truly solve how authentication is done, I mean, yes, these problems are going to continue to exist. Am I hearing it right?
In a nutshell, yeah. Like we talk about identity programs for a reason, right? It's not deploy a product and you're done. You have to have identity programs. So you're right. As more work is put into making passkeys stronger, better, more easy to use, it means you're going to get better security, but it also means you now have to start looking at other aspects of your security program. Like, there's such amazing work happening with things like shared signals, as well as continuous identity continues to, unintended, continues to evolve. One of the reasons why, for example, FIDO Alliance started working on identity verification and binding is because of the fact that you can't really rely on a strong credential if you don't secure the way in which the credential is created and bound to the identity in the first place, as well as how you go through recovery flows for reestablishing a lost credential and so on. So that's the reason why FIDO Alliance went in and with the members worked on the identity verification and binding working group. So you have to continue to look at the full picture, absolutely. And any technology never ends, right? So obviously, we have to continue to listen to security researchers who work with the technology as it is today and continue to help identify ways, novel attack methods, or different things that are being brought up. We're always receptive to that. We have to be, just because technology evolving means protocols, standards, solutions have to evolve. So it's a never-ending cycle in that sense. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the FIDO Alliance is there is still a lot to be done, and it has to continue to evolve as we continue to move in this, increasingly digital world.
One of the things I remember Rusty brought up in his article was if you're some of these attacks, I think admittedly are kind of sophisticated, but it was around if you are, let's just say you're a journalist or a human rights activist, right? And you might be somebody who is the target of a state-sponsored actor, whatever your role might be in society. And maybe passkeys aren't for you. And I kind of thought to myself, with the sophistication of these attacks, because it was, I think, tied to a lot of the phishing of sync passkeys, right? And I thought to myself, well, if you're in that kind of space, hopefully you're not as susceptible to being phished as the common human being is. I don't know if that makes sense, but in other words, if like I'm a human rights journalist, right, I shouldn't be sending money to the Nigerian prince scam.
I think you're spot on in that. As I said earlier, threat models matter a lot, right? So, as anybody who's deploying passkeys for their audience, for their user base, needs to understand that it's one thing for you to be a retail organization that is selling online, tchotchkes. It's a very different thing if you're, as you said, you're a journalist who may be going into areas where you have to worry about your security, you have to worry about phones. I think if I remember correctly, one of the demonstrations that Rusty talked about requires proximity. So it's not a remote attack. You have to be near somebody to be able to launch that attack. And so proximity-based attacks add a whole different dimension to this equation, right? So all those things matter. The platform providers, the credential providers, they're all getting much better at securing your credentials, including your passkeys. If you're a journalist and you're using, I think it's advanced protection mode or something like that on iPhones that you can deploy that can help, even secure your phone at in a much better way. A journalist who knows that they're likely to get targeted understands that and is probably taking those kinds of security measures anyway. Comes back to environmental concerns. So absolutely. Sync passkeys aren't necessarily a bad thing, even if you're a targeted user. It just means that you have to understand your environment more accurately. And, it's becoming increasingly common, for example, for people who are going to be targeted to work with burner phones. You're not going to log in with the same credential provider on your burner phone that you are on your regular phone. And in that case, if you're making that decision, sync passking it can still be a good solution for you on your regular phone as opposed to your burner phone.
Yeah, and hopefully you're avoiding installing potential malware and browser extensions and ad blockers and stuff like that. Well, I think I wanted to kind of wrap this up by thanking Rusty for putting that information out there. Thank you for coming on to the podcast to kind of talk about it. And the way I'd like to wrap all this up would be there are surely folks out there. I mean, look, Passkeys has been deployed in some of the largest tech and even financial environments that, I've been pleasantly surprised with how quickly this has taken off. But there are probably practitioners out there who are like this close to implementing passkeys for their organization who are now taking a pause. And I want to know, what are the tips or tricks that you would, maybe key takeaways that you would have for them on this topic so they can get smarter and feel more confident in their decision?
I think start by understanding how Passkeys fits into your authentication framework and what you're comparing it to. I think a lot of the concerns that people have with Passkeys tends to be because they're looking at it in isolation as opposed to looking at it within the context of their overall solution. This is a very simplistic example, but one of the issues that folks bring up is, well, if I'm using a synced passkey now, it's getting synced from one phone to another phone that the user has. How do I know that I've lost control of them? And my answer would be, well, what were you doing for passwords before that, right? If they were using a password manager, that password manager may be on both phones. If they were using Google Authenticator, they may have Google Authenticator deployed on both phones. They may be receiving their SMS OTP on a virtual app, one of those communicator apps, which is also on both phones. So actually understand within the context of what are you comparing it to and what are your alternatives. Understand your threat model and then figure out how it fits into that. You're still looking at something that's far better than anything else that is out there because of the cryptographic nature of it, because of the phishing resistance that it brings to the table. And the platforms, all of these are getting way, way better. So it's not like you're losing anything by going to that. In fact, you're gaining, but it needs to be looked at within, comes back to threat models, larger identity program. It's no different than what I'm sure both of you have done in the past, where you've gone in and somebody's doing the proverbial digital transformation project, and you have to show them, look, this is how you go from Post-it notes to a single sign-on solution, and here's the benefits, and so on and so forth. It's the same thought process, effectively.
So really, it's a sliding scale, right? It's passwords are bad. We can all agree on that. Passkeys are better, but they're not perfect, just like anything else in the space. So if you're worried about a passkey synchronization attack, a man-in-the-middle attack, a phishing attack, those same attacks can happen whether or not you have a passkey. It's also true for passwords. It's also true for API credentials. It's also true for literally anything that could be intercepted. So I still fall on the side of, look, passkeys are still better than a password. It's one less thing I have to remember. If someone's going to go to the effort of, trying to intercept my synced passkey from, a wallet on one device into another, okay, I accept that risk, because what's the alternative? A Post-it note on the back of my keyboard with a password?
Yep.
I mean,
I'm not going to denigrate that, because there are certain people who certain model means, what is the old adage? The password diary that is sitting in somebody's desk is still valid for certain folks. I'm not going to say that that's a bad idea. It goes back to, what are you trying to cater to? What is your actual requirements?
Yeah. I've seen scenarios where you write out the password and you lock it in a safe somewhere, right? It's like truly a break glass account, where, there are certainly needs for all that. But I think for the vast majority of consumers, when it comes to normal people doing normal identity account things, passwords, passkeys are still way better, way more convenient, and just a better solution. I'm curious, this is kind of a good segue into the Authenticate conference, because Authenticate conference tends to be the more technical group of people in this space, really focused on authentication. And I know you've been there, for many years at this point, and now you're the CTO. Are these the types of conversations that are already taking place either behind doors or in the hallways at places like Authenticate? Because I remember when Passkeys first came out, I was like, oh, that's cool. But now my passkey lives on my Windows device, and I have no way to get it to my phone and my Mac and all those other things. And I was like, give me a way to sync it, because until then, it's just another thing on my account that I can't really use. It's like, it wouldn't surprise me that these types of issues have already been thought about and are in the works of trying to figure out, okay, how do we solve for these, criticisms or concerns around it, whether they are, a specific attack, like nation state directed, or if it's just a spray and pray and hope that, you get the 0.1% to click on the thing to give you their account.
Yeah, no, they're definitely happening. And I think I'll actually give you a two-part answer, if you will, right? One is, absolutely, these conversations are happening at Authenticate. There's the meetings that are for the techiest of the tech folks who want to go in and really understand how things are working at the lowest levels. And then there are case studies and presentations about how folks are rolling it out, whether it's Wells Fargo deploying passkeys and bringing it to the market, or really cool solutions from FIDO members who are solving things like, how do folks who are working on the factory floor using FIDO to authenticate and get access, or be able to do specific tasks but not other tasks, and so on and so forth. And you get to see sort of the broad range within which FIDO operates. And you also will discover things that maybe you didn't understand that FIDO could help with, whether as FIDO members providing solutions. So one of the coolest things that I've been learning about is this thing called FIDO device onboarding, which, at first blush, I was like, well, why do we have a standard called FDO, which is about IoT devices? There's no people, whatever. This is about device onboarding, edge computing, IoT devices. But it comes back to that it's in support of the core mission of getting rid of passwords. And if you look at supply chain attacks, and if you look at how those things are being deployed today, you always end up with the human involved in the process at a certain point, providing a credential, which can be stolen, can be phished. And when you start looking at the bigger picture of things like the Cyber Resiliency Act in Europe or supply chain attacks that have been in the news, there's a lot of really cool, FIDO members like Intel, Dell, Red Hat, who are all working, have built a standard and now working actually in version 2. And these might be applicable to you or might give you ideas as you start looking at things like you're running your data center, or you're looking at the cloud, or you're looking at NHI-oriented stuff, things like that. It's really, really cool to find all these members working on these really cool projects, and you get to learn about them and discover them at a conference like Authenticate. So I really love that part. And then the second part is and then you can figure out where to get involved, right? Some of the best conversations are happening in the working groups. So if you join as a FIDO member, I'm sitting in the UX working group for the enterprise deployment piece. A lot of the conversation that we just had, where you're asking all these questions, the folks in the enterprise deployment working group are asking the same questions and saying, well, we have to cater to our enterprise users who may be bringing their own device. And so now they're both a individual consumer user and an employee on the same device. How do I handle that? How do I manage their credentials without interfering with what they're doing on their personal side, and what are the security considerations, what are the UX considerations? So they're having these really cool conversations, and they're always looking for input. They're looking for requirements. They're running surveys to get feedback and understand these things. So just getting involved, even if just to participate as a lurker sometimes I've been a lurker for 2 weeks now in all these calls, and I'm just hearing the sheer volume of, work that is happening in all of these. It's kind of amazing to see that.
Lurker is a very good description of how I attend the Authenticate conference, because there are way smarter people that are doing, really the yeoman's work of getting these big behemoths from an IDP perspective to kind of play together and agree on standards. And so I learned a lot just being in the room and listening to stuff. So I think that's great advice to just kind of go and learn by osmosis if that works for you. Historically, Authenticate has been more focused on authentication, right? Is that still the focus for the conference as you see it as it comes up? Or is it looking to expand into other areas around identity? Like, how do you see the evolution of the conference itself and sort of the topics that are going in front of the members now?
It's definitely evolving, because identity is evolving, and authentication by its nature has to be playing in different parts of it. I mentioned, for example, earlier that identity verification and binding was identified very early on as a very critical piece that FIDO had to get involved in, because it was so crucial to the supply chain of authentication and identity, right? So they had to get involved in that. There's some like I mentioned FDO, there's an automotive special interest group. Like if you think about automotive and your computer on wheels, right? It's so many services, so many systems, but at the end, there is a human in there that is a driver who has to authenticate to the car, authenticate to the services within it. And we're moving to an increasingly digital world, and you don't want that to be left to chance. You want that to be secure as well. So whether you're looking at things like the automotive, say, FinServ has obviously been there for a long time, but you're looking at, the biometrics working group, right? The biometrics working group is hard at work and figuring out how biometrics, as it increasingly becomes part of the equation of our identity lives, how does that have to be there from a assurance perspective? So those kind of things sort of are all there being discussed, and some of these groups emerge from conversations that happen at Authenticate, right? You come there and people start talking about their challenges, and the next thing you know, they're like, well, we should create a study group. And then the next thing you know, that's become a special interest group. And the next thing is now a working group. And so Authenticate is a great place to kickstart something. If you see what you're working on not getting addressed somewhere, come be a catalyst.
So how does that work? So let me pick on the automotive side of things, because I know digital key for automobiles is sort of like the big thing, and for good reason, right? It's a great convenient thing. But for whatever reason, and I'm not going to name manufacturers, a lot of them still struggle with phone as a key or watch as a key. I have to assume that there is some level of authentication, hopefully, being done there, right, to make sure that's the right device to the right thing. Is this an area where, for instance, it's the automotive side of things can say, hey, look, this is a problem. Is this something to do with the way that people are authenticating and it's rejecting it, or is it something else in the software? I point on those only as an example because I know that's a common frustration point for a lot of the newer vehicles that struggle with it. Yeah. Fortunately, it's about the only thing that works right on my car, so I've never had that problem. I have other software issues, but I'm just curious if when you're having conversations with those types of folks, are those the type of things? Because it's like, okay, yeah, here's a problem. And a lot of people are like, well, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to go on Reddit and complain. Well, how about instead, why don't we go to like the source of where the things might be happening and start to build these, special interest groups or working groups or whatever we want to call them. Walk me through how that actually happens, because I think there's a lot of really great keyboard warriors out there. And here's an opportunity to say, okay, let's actually solve the problem instead of just complaining about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So to be clear, I'm not advocating that people come there and start using it as a support channel to say, hey, my car is not working. But
yeah, please don't do that.
But that said, if you're in the industry, obviously, if you're working with these and you're trying to build solutions for this, or you're trying to solve this problem, right? This is the right place to come and have those conversations. So like I said, a lot of these things sort of emerge from conversations that start in the hallways. Maybe you go and have a discussion about it in a plenary room, and then you discover that, hey, there is a critical mass of issues here. There's a critical mass of requirements here. We can actually put something together and have multiple people solving it, because at the end of the day, the power of the Alliance is like anything else. It comes from the membership and the collective wisdom and intelligence that they have. So being in the room allows you to find those commonalities and allows you to understand and define, hey, we have a common set of requirements. I'm not the only one struggling with this. I don't have to keep doing this on my own or building my own proprietary solutions. There is a way for me to find my community, my cohort, who I can work with on solving this problem. And by virtue of that, get access to the folks I can't directly interact with, right? You're not going to be able to go in and talk with the head of identity at name your large automotive manufacturer by finding the coffee shop that they frequent. Not recommending that. But you come
Not
to
that it didn't happen in Identiverse over sushi with someone that I know, me complaining about all the EV problems. That would never happen.
Exactly. But it can happen at Authenticate and Identiverse and all these conferences, because people are looking for their community to have these conversations. And oftentimes what you'll find is, it's not like they don't know these problems exist, right? It's not like the folks who are running identity at automotive or hardware or industry don't know these problems exist. Oftentimes they need enough people to help them make the business case to their own management that this is something we need to tackle, right? So it is a community project. It is working together as a community to build that solution.
So Nishant, I'm going to bring up kind of a heavy topic. We lost another great one in the identity industry recently, Andrew Nash. I know you were close with Andrew. What should people know about him?
So, this is a hard one. I was just using the word community a lot, right? That's not a mistake. Like that's really something that came to me from him. Like I really understood that from him, because he, as you said, he's been one of the OGs for a long time. I was lucky enough to be his partner on the program committee for the identity track at the RSA conference for many, many years now running. And, he had this curmudgeonly, persona to him that hid one of the most generous people I knew. Right? Whether he was, sitting down and explaining the most obtuse topics in identity, or taking you down to his basement to show you the machining work that he was doing, and They opened their home for so many years. Him and Pam opened their home for so many years for the annual Bootstrap party before the RSA conference, as a way of building community, as a way of making connections, right? A lot of us, like, I wouldn't have this job if I didn't have connections that exist because Andrew brought people together, right? That was what he understood. And so when I was thinking about, what did I want to do next before I took the FIDO role, it came a lot of it came back to, well, I want to make a difference. And I learned that idea. I learned that that's what I wanted to do because I saw how he went about his business, right? He worked at some of the largest organizations and built startups, but he did it in such a generous, quiet manner. Those of us who knew him, but he wasn't out there like as the face of a company or, doing sort of a national tour, if you will. But he would have drawn crowds because he was amazing. He knew everything and he shared it generously.
I love that. This was coincidental, us having you on at this time, but for you to be able to pay homage to him like that means a lot. He's another one of these great people within our industry who's now no longer with us. But I do want to now lighten things up a little bit. We don't have a whole lot of time, so let's kind of do this like a lightning round, if I could. Bring up a few different topics, and a lot of times I bring up these topics and like, talk about the future of this, that, or the other thing. Talk about AI in the future. Actually, what I'd like to do is challenge you a little bit differently, which is let's take 2 minutes on each one of these topics to talk about where things are right now. And I will use AI, but AI is creeping into everything and everywhere, including identity. What is the state of AI and identity now?
It is, as you said, it's creeping into everything. Everybody's trying to add AI to their products or say this, whether they're doing it or not, right? On the other hand, there's people who have been using AI for a very long time in their products without ever calling it AI. So I think it's here to stay, right? I think there is still a reckoning coming in terms of just the cost of adding AI to everything. People don't quite understand that. As we've seen before, a lot of this stuff is VC subsidized, and at a certain point, this idea that you can continue to leverage that is going to become an issue. But the technology is going to continue to get better, and it is going to stretch the boundaries and break things, along the way. Like we see, just taking Passkeys as an example, Passkeys means you don't have a password that you can share with an agent for it to work, to log in as you. So what does that mean from an authentication flow standpoint? What does it mean when you're building agentic processes where you want it to be able to operate on your behalf across services? How does that factor in? What is that equation looking like? So you see work happening feverishly across the board, whether it's in the FIDO Alliance, whether it's in the OpenID Foundation, whether it's in W3C and other standards organizations. There's a lot that's going to be happening. And as usual, the tech is going to outpace standards. The tech is going to outpace best practices and guidance. So we kind of have to be prepared for things to break a little bit. But there are a lot of folks who are working really hard on it.
Yeah, something I've thought about a lot about as well is what's going to happen with intellectual property. It does seem like the lines could blur where intellectual property thoughts, things like that can be put into an AI, and then what becomes to them? Are you training a model that doesn't really keep track of what is intellectual property? Where do thoughts belong? Do they belong to some person or some entity, or are they in the public domain? So that's just a little thought that I've been having lately. Next topic, decentralized identity.
I think it's a very loaded term because it's been bandied about and used and misused many times over. But we're definitely moving towards a place where decentralized or federated models are going to start to become practical, especially as we start seeing how wallets are becoming more and more common as people start building wallet infrastructure. People start building out the standards for being able to present credentials across organizational boundaries, across jurisdictional boundaries in a way that can be accepted and certified in a privacy preserving manner. So I think there's a lot of work happening there. I am very hopeful about that aspect of what would have been called decentralized identity in the past, that is actually going to be really driving utility and value, and creating a world where we can actually present an aspect of our identity in a privacy preserving manner much more seamlessly and easily than we used to be able to do before.
We've been hearing about decentralized identity for years now, and I don't feel like we're anywhere close to it in the US, at least. Europe seems to be much further along with their plans on it, just based on what I saw at the EIC conference earlier this year. What I've also noticed is nobody's calling it blockchain anymore. It's decentralized identity. And so is this a branding shift? Is this a marketing strategy to kind of get away from, maybe the crypto sort of camp and more towards the broader technology as a solution? Because I certainly see the benefit of it. I just don't see it happen anytime soon in the US because of either government, right? And people not trusting if the government runs it, or maybe if it's healthcare, or if it's finance, or if it's education. Like, who's going to run these giant rings of being able to, have a decentralized identity? Because it's not like, the normal human being is going to say, oh, yeah, just connect to my, to my ledger. Like, that doesn't make sense for most people. How do you see this happening in the US, going forward?
Yeah. So, as Jim said, I'm not one to prognosticate the future, but I will say this. And I think the term decentralized, like I said, becomes overloaded, and therefore I try not to get too hung up on the word, especially not on the technology behind it. There's companies that are using permission blockchains. There are companies that are using other stuff. I think one of the shifts that we're seeing is people are starting to focus more on the use cases, which is always good. They're starting to focus on the utility, which is always good. And so I think wallets is, and Heather Flanagan has an amazing post about, should we still be calling it wallets? And I highly encourage folks to check that out and check out everything Heather Flanagan says, because that's always good. But sticking with the wallet term for a while, I do think that will help. Like in the US, for example, yeah, we're not going to have a national identity that's going to be doing anything like that, but you have MDLs. And MDLs, our driver's licenses have been our de facto identity for a long time for many different use cases. So can the MDLs become the way we do this in a decentralized manner, especially if you take into account some of the work that's happening on phone home versus no phone home and all these kind of things that are being discussed, and you add in privacy considerations? But yeah, that could be a way to get there. And then it'll evolve from there. Like the minute somebody sees something working, 500 other things are going to show up saying, oh, we can do that, but better, or we can do that, but slightly different. And it'll mushroom from there. So I do think utility will drive it. And I think part of what will drive the US is seeing it happen everywhere else. Like Europe is obviously very visible in what they're doing on wallets, but actually this is happening all over the world now, right? Every place, whether it's Southeast Asia, I saw a lot of work happening in the Middle East and Asia and in Africa, where people want this because they see how it unlocks the economic engine, right? Like they see the value of it. So there's a lot of efforts that are going to be happening. And I think in parallel, there's a lot of work happening at the standards bodies to try and enable it to happen in a good way, right? So that'll take some time, but I think it'll happen.
I was going to mention the MDL as well, but with Jeff's entry, we definitely violated the 2-minute answer in the lightning round. I'm going to
allow it. As the judge, I'll allow it.
You can't be the judge and the jury, right?
Sure, I can.
Anyway, we'll just do one more. It's 2025. So if somebody's listening to this 800 years from now, that there's their context. We're talking about non-human identity. What do you think of non-human identity? Is it even a good term?
Well, 800 years from now, nobody's going to care about human versus non-human identity. It's all going to be just identity. And hopefully it's going to be invisible because it's just going to happen and people won't have to do anything for it. But that's 800 years from now. I think the NHI wave that's happening right now, there's again, it's the same thing. There's a lot of old technology that's being rebranded NHI. There's a lot of new work happening. I think the AI stuff is going to trigger a lot of interesting work in that same vein. But yeah, I'm not sold on the term because I think it encapsulates too many different things and blurs the boundaries a little bit too much. Trying to put everything under one umbrella can make things confusing. And I think a little bit of precision can go a long way in making sure that people don't overestimate what something can do or identify what value something can bring. And we've suffered from that a lot in our identity space, if you will. So I think a little bit more precision would be valuable. But hey, if nothing else, it's putting attention on the problem, and that's always a good thing.
Like all things, I think it comes down to context, and context matters whenever you're having a conversation, whether it's NHI, whether it's machine identity, whether it's, whatever term we want to use. Again, these are not new concepts. They've been around forever. There's always been, some sort of machine or non-human identity operating behind the scenes, service accounts, et cetera. I just wish you would settle sort of like on a standard just way to call it, because we are awesome as an industry of coming up with new acronyms and having like 8 different ways to call the same thing. And so this is just an area that, again, creates unnecessary confusion if we can't agree to have the same, at least, vocabulary for things like that. It bugs me.
Yes, that is unfortunately a problem we've been, struggling with ever since I started working in identity, and that's been a long time.
Well, let's wrap up this conversation on your background. So I notice, for people who are listening to this, and if you're not seeing this on YouTube, come over, give us a like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot. You've got a couple pictures of New York stuff. I think I see Mariano Rivera behind you. I think I see the Giants behind you. Is this just you as a New York sports fan, or is there some deeper significance, or is this like a Taylor Swift thing where there's like hidden meaning between these, pictures? Like, what is the play here, Nishant?
The play here is to suck up to Jim, right?
Well, Jim is a Yankees fan, unfortunately.
Yeah, the New York thing is just, I am a New Yorker at heart. Like growing up, coming and being in New York was always my dream. It was like, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to go to succeed. So, and then I have a lot of family, and, that just meant adopting the New York sports teams. And I don't do anything halfway. So if I'm in it all the way. So that meant the good stuff with the Yankees, the bad years with the Giants, then those 2 improbable runs with the Giants, and what Jim and I are dealing with this year with the Yankees, which is not good for my heart rate.
So is it all New York sports, or do you focus on just the Yankees and the Giants and you say, forget about the Jets and the Mets?
You cannot do both at the same time. You have to choose.
Okay.
Anybody who says they can do both is not a New Yorker. Let's put it that way.
And I feel the same way as a recovering Chicagoan. You have the White Sox and you have the Cubs. And it'll always bug me when people say, well, I'm a fan of both teams. No, pick one. You have to pick one. And the right answer is always the Cubs. You definitely should not be a Sox fan. It's just dirty, dirty, dirty. So
any Sox fan. No, if the name has the Sox, you cannot be their fan.
White Sox, Red Sox, whatever it may be, they're all the enemy. So sorry, Boston and the South Side of Chicago.
Yeah, we just lost a whole bunch of listeners. Thanks, Jeff.
You know what? Worth it. That's fine. That's a hill I'm ready to die on, and I'll start picking people as they try to come up it. Nishant, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Really excited to see you in your new role and seeing you here in a couple weeks here at the Authenticate conference. So
yeah,
Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing you at Authenticate and having Megan kick your ass again on stage.
No way. No way.
Not mine. It'll be Jim's because I'm the Steve Harvey here. But yes, FIDO Feud Round 2 is underway.
Oh, yeah.
I am working feverishly on the questions that we're going to answer with Adrian, 1-to-1. So only she and I know the questions, and we'll have the answers. And so it'll be a surprise for everybody involved when it comes up to it. But last year was a lot of fun. And the goal is to make it even bigger, better, and maybe even more tequila than it was last year on stage. We'll see. I don't know if we can do that again. That might have been a problem that we just didn't ask for permission last time.
You know what, though? I'm thinking now maybe I should have Nishant on my team. So, hey, if they kick our ass, they kick our ass.
The royal ass, so to
The
speak.
royal, yeah, gets kicked.
All right, let's leave it there. Nishant, thanks so much. I'm going to have links in our show notes for people to connect with you on LinkedIn, link to FIDO Alliance. Don't forget the conference discounts on our website for things like Authenticate, as well as cybersecurity summits, as well as Identiverse and Gartner coming soon. So check those out. Also have link to the article by Rusty Deaton. So again, great article by Rusty. Glad to see it out there. We need to have conversations like that kind of put out into the forum where we can have discussions around it. And then, let's see, Nishant, you mentioned Heather's wallet article. So Kill the Wallet, Rethinking the Metaphors Behind Digital Identity by Heather Flanagan. We'll have that link in our show notes as well. So encourage people to check that out. And she's got a very cool podcast that she does where she kind of talks through her blog as she's kind of written it, which is very neat. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you're driving around, having the soothing voice of Heather reading out identity thoughts to you is a good way to go.
See, the only thing missing is like the cat in the background, which you just can't get on, without the video component of it. But maybe there's an editing tip there to like put maybe a slow, soft, purr behind as like, a little bit of, what's the voice thing that you do with like, people like soothing ASMR, like something like that, right? For the podcast. Maybe we'll do that on ours. Maybe we'll do that for the next April Fool's joke.
Sounds
all
good.
right. Like and subscribe, share with friends, share with enemies. Doesn't matter as long as they hit like and subscribe. IDACpodcast.com. And with that, we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.